On a day where many families spent the day driving to, watching and perhaps even participating in an array of junior sporting pursuits, the Jilks went jumping.
Not everybody needs to be extreme as this, but we need to give kids the chance and the opportunity to do the things that they want to do.
And Tyrone wanted to clear 30 metres or 100 yards in the old measure, a distance no other rider his age in the world has made. Well, as far as anyone knows for sure. You see, the other hurdle here is the Guinness Book doesn't recognise a rider's feet under the age of 16. Tyrone learnt that the hard way after jumping just shy of 30 metres last year, aged just 10. But undeterred today, he went for it. A sore wrist forced a rest and a rethink. Move the ramp further back. The youngster then gunned his KTM 65 and went again. Sailing past the magic mark by almost 4 metres, Tyrone celebrated the only way he knew how.
Well, I just went the same speed as all the others. I just twisted the throttle that bit further, and then when I was in the air I just thought, this has got to be it.
A kiss farewell perhaps for his favourite ride, with the youngster already planning to go further on a bigger machine next year.
Disbelief, horror, anger and fear are common responses to tragedy, and ones the Hunter Victim Support Unit Vocal is helping people deal with following yesterday's tragedy.
We know there'll be people here whose lives have been absolutely changed as a result of what happened across the road here. People tend to think, I'm overreacting, why am I affected? It didn't really happen to me, but it happened very close.
A 35-year-old Edgeworth man has been charged with the murders of a 58-year-old male and a 34-year-old female at this house in Drury Street, Wallsend. While police investigations continued at the scene today, there was work being done to comfort nearby residents, volunteers ensuring people know who to contact if they need help. Parents in the local area are being encouraged to seek advice if their children begin acting out of character.
They won't want to be alone at night, and they'll want all the lights on in the house, and they'll come in and want to talk to mum in the middle of the night just to reassure themselves that things are all right.
The Victim Support Unit can be contacted on this number. Colleen West, NBN News.
The Chernobyl disaster in 1986 forever changed our impression of nuclear power. In fact, it created mass hysteria with 50,000 abortions by pregnant women, partly due to anti-nuclear scare campaigns. Ever since, the words nuclear energy have evoked negative images, but that's not the case for Associate Professor Colin Kay.
The worst fallacy is that nuclear power is not safe. Now, Chernobyl was a management disaster, but it's the only time in over 12,000 reactor years of safe operation that any lives were lost.
In fact, he says the Chernobyl death toll stands at 50 caused by radiation, not 30,000 as once reported. There's now 442 nuclear power stations in the world, 103 in the USA alone. Professor Kay says it's time Australia harnesses uranium and nuclear power rather than exhausting coal supplies.
There's no other real way of satisfying Australia's future power needs. The amount of pollution produced by nuclear is, nothing of any significance is released to the atmosphere, so there's no greenhouse gas emissions.
In his latest book, Nuclear Energy Fallacies, Mr Kay examines modern media, even the light-hearted Simpsons family drawn into the debate.
They show pictures of Homer Simpson waving ghostly green ingots of supposedly radioactive material. It's a media scare.
Here at Tony Whitehead's family farm near Scone, the cow is sacred, not in the religious sense, but in the most practical of ways. Like many on the land, the Whiteheads have channelled everything into keeping their herd happy. Without it, they have nothing.
I think you keep cutting corners, keep cutting your costs, so you just sort of, if you don't need something, you don't go and buy it. You keep your hands in your pocket and just be willing to go without.
Not that the animals do. The droughts meant major money for truckloads of feed and also for irrigation to make this small oasis in the desert a dairy cow's delight. All this effort to keep milk flowing from the farm to our homes.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think a lot of city people realise the effort that we put in and the sacrifices we make to make the farm work.
A whinging farmer? Tony reckons he's not, but he says a lot of people just don't understand the country life that his family loves. Tony does the farm work while his dad and brother run the dairy. In better times, they say it's a good business. But after years of drought, it's certainly no cash cow.
We're not making a great deal of money, if any. But it'll get better.
There's that famous farmer's optimism.
I think you've got to be very optimistic or very stupid.
Which are you?
I think we're pretty stupid. But no, it's a really good industry, but you've got to be prepared to put the hard yards in to be able to get the rewards.
And with the worst of winter still to come, there are some more hard yards to be travelled yet. Tomorrow night we'll look at help for farmers, both practical and emotional, to survive the drought.
Two bins will be placed out every fortnight and one truck will be collecting them, having a divided truck to keep the waste and the recyclables separate.
They can spell the end of a bumper grape crop, little nasties known to wine producers as downy mildew, powdery mildew and bunch rot. So knowing exactly how to prevent pests and disease from affecting grapevines is vital information to growers.
It can have a huge impact. It could mean a total crop failure. So, and for a vineyard grower, that's everything for the year.
As part of today's seminar organised by the Hunter Valley Vineyard Association, a website, cropwatchonline.com, was presented for the first time, which allows growers to spot vineyard symptoms out in the field.
Disease diagnosis is crucial because if you don't diagnose the disease correctly, you can spend thousands of dollars trying to control disease and then lose far more if you've got it wrong.
Experts in viticulture, wine marketing and vine diseases addressed 110 producers from the Hunter Valley and as far as Port Macquarie.
It's an opportunity to provide them with an update of some of the latest developments and technical information in viticulture that'll help them for both the profitability and sustainability of their wine and vineyard businesses.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. This was always going to be a midwife-operated facility, but at the 11th hour, the Belmont birthing service is attracting plenty of unwanted attention.
I'd like to really clarify some information that is about that we've dismissed obstetricians as a result of this change. We have not dismissed any obstetricians. One obstetrician has resigned at Belmont as a result of his personal situation.
The remaining specialists have been asked to provide gynaecology and antenatal services at the hospital while travelling to John Hunter to carry out obstetric services. Only women at low risk of complications will use the birth centre, and if problems do arise during birth, mother and baby will be transferred to the John Hunter.
We know from international data that it's safe, that we can transfer women in a timely way, that midwives are qualified to detect when things are going wrong.
The health service says there's always an element of risk when it comes to deliveries, but midwives have been trained in advanced life support skills, and it seems expectant mothers are putting their trust in the process, with more than 100 already booked into the service, which opens next month. Colleen West, NBN News.
It's an encouraging sign. The man who reportedly lifted the Origin side by 25% back with his club team, which could do with a similar lift. Andrew Johns' return, though, the only good news in a camp that remains without the Gidley brothers and another two who appear set for season-ending surgery.
Kirk Reynoldsson is one, Craig Hall's another, so the casualty list is growing by the second.
In contrast, Regan Tanner is the only Knight to have started every match this season. Against Penrith this weekend, it'll be with Steve Simpson in the front row, with Adam Woolnough relegated to the bench.
Try and get some confidence back in his game and get him back playing as well as we know he can.
And new Knights board member Mark Fitzgibbon has hit the ground running as the club continues to position itself for the best way to secure a successful long-term future.
It won't happen overnight, that's for sure, but there is a sense of urgency in the club, so things have to happen reasonably quickly.
A merger with West's leagues remains the most likely scenario. However, little progress has been made, given West's are still to ascertain just what financial position the football club is in.
In the 18 months since the final report of the Lower Hunter Transport Working Group was unveiled, two issues have fuelled pro-rail opposition to the proposed overhaul. If stopping heavy rail at Broadmeadow wasn't bad enough, the suggestion that land along the corridor could be sold to developers for housing and offices has only polarised the debate. But today, Newcastle developer Keith Stronach distanced himself from the land, describing it as unusable.
I don't think so. I think it's too narrow, and to me, it's not the right use.
He does, however, support keeping the Broadmeadow-Newcastle line as a transport corridor and replacing existing trains with trams or light rail.
It's ideal because it's easy to access, it's non-intrusive, it's quiet, and the trams can stop at the traffic lights and be coordinated with the traffic lights in the street, so that problems like Stewart Avenue are fixed straight away.
And that includes using the Broadmeadow-Hamilton North area as a park and ride interchange location.
Use the showground for parking. You could also use Woodville Junction. There's plenty of land out in that area that could be developed.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
West Australian Bree Turnbull enjoyed a two-stroke lead going into this morning's second round, but a biting wind soon took the edge away. Sydney's Sarah O picked up the pieces, shrugging off the elements to post a 4-shot lead after 13 holes. The Australian amateur champ was on target to eagle the par 5 14th, going oh so close, but finishing with the birdie. Her playing partners followed suit, but it was Sarah to make the biggest impact, going into day 3 with a 2-stroke buffer. Sunny Park made a second round charge as well, finishing with a respectable 73 to sit in equal 4th. Nikki Garrett from the Central Coast finished 2 shots better than her first round, a result made that much more rewarding given what was a testing day on the greens. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Patrons of the Lucky Country Hotel know a good deal when they see one, but across the weekend they got more than they bargained for. Due to a slip-up by staff, this ATM was handing out $50 notes instead of 20s and vice versa.
The money trays were placed back in the wrong order, and where the 20s go, the 50s were put, and where the 50s go, the 20s were put. So when the people accessed the auto teller to try and get some money out, quite often the amounts were wrong.
Interestingly, there were plenty of complaints from people who were shortchanged, but not one from those who found themselves $30 up.
I think it was a situation where if you wanted 50, you were a bit stiffed, but if you only wanted 20, you did very well.
Patrons who only heard about the slip-up today were disappointed. They missed out.
I want to know where I was when it was. I would have been happy with a few 50s over 20s.
But the pub has complained to police, who say offences have been committed and people should return the cash.
There's an offence being committed here, the offence of fraud. I suppose basically put it's a stealing, and we'll need to try and trace those people down.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
He's the best that's ever been. Packing 6 world titles, Kelly Slater's mere presence can often win him a heat before he even paddles out. But it was Darren O'Rafferty who set the pace with a slashing 9.3 first-up ride. The former Australian junior champion edging out the current ratings leader for the first time.
Can't believe it. It's first time I've ever beaten him. Surfed against him about four times and he smoked me every time, and I finally got one up on him, and it's one of the best feelings in the world.
Brazilian Peterson Rosa was saying the same thing after the very next heat. The 30-year-old making the most of his day in the sun by downing 3-time world champion Andy Irons. Luke Egan and then Joel Parkinson were the next big names to tumble, with the third seed beaten by fellow Aussie Phil McDonald. Danny Wills and Nathan Hedge made it through, as did Gold Coast's Mick Fanning, who snuck into the quarterfinals where he'll now meet O'Rafferty.
Newcastle may be the world's biggest exporter of coal, but the Port Corporation doesn't want to rest on its laurels and has unveiled a plan to attract new business opportunities dockside.
Newcastle Port Corporation's long-term goal is to see our existing growth supplemented by a diversified trade and marine-related activities.
8 harbourside sites that will be leased to suitable operators have been put into a property portfolio with expression of interest to close in a month. It includes the former state dockyard offices and workshops and a newly released 1 hectare site at Western Basin near Four Jacks Dockyard.
So we see there the marine-related activities coming to that site, but equally by going through an expression of interest process, we open it up to the marketplace in its full entity.
Also out for lease, the top floor of the corporation's Newcastle head office. Even on a wet day, the former Workers' Compensation Court boasts one of the harbour's best views. And the corporation has one piece of land for sale or lease, with less than half a hectare behind the Tower Cinemas placed on the market. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Training with a difference for the Knights today, who headed indoors. But make no mistake, the team theme for the week is focused on this weekend rather than their recent victory.
Last week won't count for much unless we can back it up with another good performance at home, and I think that's what the players will be striving for on Saturday night.
The Knights and Queensland coach will split time between both camps this week, but he's not the only one with a hectic travel schedule. Teenage 5'8" Jared Mullen will mix top-grade football with National Schoolboy Carnival commitments.
I've got to play Saturday night, and then get up 5 o'clock next morning on Sunday, drive down to Wagga and then play at 1:30 there.
Still completing his HSC studies, his NRL education has been fast-tracked this season, including lessons from the Master number 7.
Yeah, it is a bit of a head spin. Can't really concentrate at school knowing I'm playing with him.
The club, meanwhile, has just 2 days left before its players off contract can negotiate with rival clubs. Among the top-tier list looking for a new deal is Josh Perry, but he's almost certain to test his worth on the open market. While Riley Brown has agreed to terms, fullback sensation Milton Thaiday is thought to be close as well. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
It's almost impossible not to be moved by these scenes where almost 300,000 people lost their lives and many were left orphaned. Father Chris Riley today told of the work he's been doing with displaced children and the emotional healing that's taken place.
And we've kept this same group of kids over the last 4 or 5 months, and to see them yesterday in prayer was just amazing.
Father Riley, who returned from Arche yesterday, took the opportunity to personally thank Hunter clubs that donated money to the tsunami appeal, as well as explaining some of the implications of the Schapelle Corby case.
Certainly the Schapelle Corby's case has hurt our relationships with Indonesia to somewhat because they're just really angry at our media, and they refuse to let our media to go into Indonesia at the moment.
He says despite any hard feelings, his work will continue abroad, but right now he's putting his energy into local projects.
On the 1st of July, we're taking over the drug court, taking that away from the health department that's been given to us. That'll be fully government funded. We've opened Indigenous services, so we actually have an all Koori household.
Colleen West, NBN News.
You don't have to go far into the back streets to find the Newcastle CBD's parking problem. From 7 a.m. weekdays, the cars of inner-city workers line some residential streets of Cooks Hill. The newly formed City Business Group claims it's the tip of a parking crisis.
The workers are a major part of our city. If we have 14,000 to 15,000 people working in the CBD, we don't have enough car parking spaces for them.
And businesses are reacting.
We can't get new businesses in because of parking, and the old ones want to go because of parking.
While the business group argues a lack of parking spaces is the issue, Newcastle Council has decided to tackle the problem by encouraging motorists to move their vehicle more regularly. From Friday, the average CBD on-street metre charge rises 10 cents an hour to $1.50. Parking station fees also go up as Council moves it into line with the on-street fees.
Our parking fees have been incredibly low, and if we don't get them up to a level where people are prepared to pay and then move on, what will happen is people will just feed meters.
If you do want to overpay for your stay, parking fines will also be more expensive from Friday. And for those wanting new parking facilities, the increased revenue will pay for two that are on the drawing board.
One is Wrights Lane, which is near Civic Station. The other is on the Burwood Street site, which Council owns.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
The fight for public space reached boiling point last night with Lake Macquarie Council chambers full to overflowing. It's this oval that dominated the meeting, with Council considering whether to allow planning for the $300 million Charlestown Square expansion by Lend-Lease to include the site.
We shouldn't be supporting that proposal. I'm sure there are other options there.
But support it, Council did, voting 7-6 in favour. Charlestown Bowling Club management has welcomed the decision, along with the Central Charlestown Rugby League Club, which says it has outgrown Ferris Oval.
There's problems there with traffic, young children kicking balls onto the road. There's also problems with drug users who are frequent visitors to the area, discard their needles.
The club would be relocated to an upgraded St John's Oval. There's still plenty to be done before that happens though, with a rescission motion forcing Council to debate the issue again next month. And there are more development plans for Lake Macquarie, with Council last night deciding it will consider a rezoning application for land at the Avondale Flying School to make way for an 1,800 lot housing development.
Certainly it will change significantly the nature of Cooranbong in that it will more than double its population.
Colleen West, NBN News.
Inside this art studio in the back streets of Islington, you'll often find Roger McFarlane chiselling away at his latest creation. It's a sculptor's haven, everything coated in a thick layer of marble and granite dust. But it's not just any old rock. Roger's imported these beauties from Iran and a region of Italy world famous for its marble.
The marble that I use, the Statuario from Carrara, is from the same area that Michelangelo got his marble from.
It all began back in 1989 when Roger enrolled himself in a WEA sculpture course in Newcastle. He's been chipping away ever since, honing his craft by basking in the creative juices of the masters in northern Tuscany.
Wanted to carve marble, but there was no one to teach me how to carve marble, so I ended up going to Italy and working in a palace studio at Pietrasanta. And I've been there 3 times now, learning different techniques.
And that's paid off. He now exhibits around the world. Roger admits that it's a pretty good life, spending his days moulding and caressing the lumps and bumps of the female form. But each work takes 3 to 4 months to complete. His latest exhibition is on display at the Cooks Hill Galleries.
The Gold Coast franchise is well and truly on track for its 2007 inclusion to the National Rugby League. It was announced that they were the successful bidder only 5 weeks ago, and in that time they haven't put a foot wrong. CEO Michael Searle's first move of selecting his coaching staff gave the consortium instant credibility. Highly regarded rookie coach John Cartwright will take the reins. His assistant will be Trevor Gilmester, and football manager Scott Sattler will also be there. Now this combination oozes potential, and as does their 3 marquee player signings thus far. Preston Campbell, New South Wales Origin rep Luke Bailey, and last night it was announced on the Footy Show that British international Brian Carney will join the club in its inaugural year. Now the June 30 deadline is now over, and expect all NRL clubs to be announcing new signings very soon. It also gives the Gold Coast permission to enter the market as well. Now I expect as many as 5 or 6 more names to be added to their rosters in the upcoming weeks. Now it's important for the game that the Gold Coast do succeed, and their professionalism so far is to be commended. It's a big week brewing. Next Wednesday is Origin 3, the decider, unbelievably without Billy Slater, dropped by the Queensland selectors. Now, personally, I think the strategy behind this decision will backfire, as will their plans trying to stop Joey Johns by out-muscling him in the game will backfire as well. Now, as you can guess, I'm tipping New South Wales to win. OK, now it's on to round 17 and it's return to Leichhardt for the Tigers. On Saturday, 3 games. Bulldogs over the Storm, Knights at home, and the Warriors to upset the Cowboys. Sunday, I like the Raiders, Broncos and Parramatta. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.
The allegation is that it shocks you. You know, you go about your daily business and something like this comes along and an allegation like this shocks you. We will leave no stone unturned.
It's a sight not seen in Newcastle for years. Unionists on the footpath, through the foyer, and also packing the main auditorium of Newcastle Panthers. 3,500 of them just at the Hunters' main meeting to begin the defence of workplace rights against impending reform by the federal government, a scene repeated at other mass meetings across the region.
We fully expected that when workers were appraised of what was going to be done by this Conservative government, that they would rally and they'd get on the streets and they'll fight.
The unionist displeasure was then turned on employers. Most marched on the Australian Industry Group's Newcastle office. And Newcastle Trades Hall has warned those who can convince the Prime Minister that Australian workers are entitled to an industrial relations system with dignified wages and conditions that they can expect a visit from union officials.
Absolutely, and we're going to make an appointment to see the Business Chamber and Bob Baldwin and a few other local personalities as well.
Sections of the crowd even targeted Newcastle MP Sharon Grierson, demanding an unequivocal commitment from Labor that it will roll back the Coalition's IR reforms.
No, not roll back whenever Labor gets back into government. Let me say to you, this is a time for unity.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
If the massive sound system overhead didn't give things away, then you only had to look behind the curtain to see what was making all the noise, with Newcastle Entertainment Centre staff busily arranging a stage for Sunday's Delta Goodrum concert. Sound checks accompanied the team's final session. It's tonight, though, the side want to get into the groove against the Darters, a team the 4th place Jaggers should beat.
And we need to, show the teams like the Firebirds and the Kestrels and the Orals that, we're not a walkover game.
The skipper just 13 goals away from a milestone of 1,400 career goals.
I've sort of only really been told that today. Look, I'd just be happy with the win and a solid performance by the team and myself.
In Newcastle Rugby League, tomorrow's match at Cessnock will be a highlight, while the Blues faced a real test at Wyong on Sunday. Out to defend their unbeaten run so far this Newcastle and Hunter rugby season, the Waratahs host the Blacks tomorrow. And in NBN soccer, 1 game tomorrow, while Lake Macquarie and South Cardiff are among those at home on Sunday.
They don't come much cuter than this. 2 koala joeys are making their first tentative overtures towards the outside world after months inside Mum's pouch. And just in time for the school holidays, the tiny attractions are causing a big stir.
I thought they were very cute and cool. They're very fluffy.
The 2 mums, Peppermint and Matilda, both shared the same male partner, Neo, who is now fighting an infection thought to have been brought on by the stress of it all. But the joeys, as yet unnamed, are fighting fit.
And they spend up to about 6 months in the pouch, so you don't even know they're there except there's bulges that are starting to appear. So and then they start to emerge and they spend another 6 months with mum till they're weaned at 12 months of age.
Blackbutt Reserve is open every day of the holidays.
The first day back at work for the Pirates, but some have hardly had time to rest up since last season. Brad Davidson and Russell Hinder have only just arrived back from playing in New Zealand.
Solid 8-day off-season, so it was good. I didn't know what to do with myself.
The hair might be different, but the ambition remains the same for a team which lasted just one playoff game last season. Now, with the club's existence secure, the team wants to threaten for a championship.
I was talking to Doc all through the process, and we were talking about unfinished business, and I know a lot of the guys came back because of that.
While they're back, the club is waiting on both import players, including American Odell Bradley.
He's more of a power player, and but a very good athlete and very versatile, and I think that and he's very tough.
Timing hasn't helped Mitch Selwood. An ankle injury ruled him out of the Australian youth side named last week, even though he's back running today. His misfortune, though, sure to be his club side's gain.
The main priority really is with the Pirates at the moment, and this way I get a real good, strong pre-season, and hopefully I can make an impact this year.
Hunter will play around 12 pre-season matches, starting with the Wollongong Hawks in 2 weeks.
No apologies, no on-camera comments. Instead, a statement quoting Vice-Chancellor Professor Nick Saunders as saying, "The university has learnt a great deal from the experience and we are determined there should be no repeat." Deputy Vice-Chancellor Brian English, who will retire in September, made no comment. The ICAC recommended disciplinary action be taken against him in relation to his lack of action in pursuing plagiarism allegations. While the corruption watchdog was also critical of former Vice-Chancellor Roger Holmes, the original whistleblower Ian Ferns says Professor Holmes was let off easy.
I thought Roger was extremely lucky, in fact. There's very little doubt that had Roger handled things appropriately, there would have been a very different outcome. It would never have come to this.
Professor Holmes's replacement says the university is now using the world's best systems for detecting plagiarism. The news of yesterday's ICAC findings has filtered through to students, and many agree the university is finally cracking down on cheats.
Profs do make it very known that they don't accept it of any kind.
They do seem to be more strict than other universities back home that I've been to.
Reforms include special software that detects plagiarism.
Now when you submit assignments, it has to go through a computer program which picks up any text that's been taken off the internet.
And I'm pleased that there's been that kind of outcome from this. It makes some of the angst worthwhile, I think.
A question mark has hung over the future for the ADI shipyard for the past 12 months. Today, as the last of the RAN's new watercraft heads for completion, Sensation New Zealand was named as the new tenant after its worldwide search for a new factory.
Well, we're starting off here. We're going to start with a 120-foot range of vessels. It's 35 metres. We're going to then expand, hopefully in 2 to 3 years, up to a 63-metre range.
The construction hall for the $1 billion Navy Minehunter project and skills for that job helped convince Sensation owner Ivan Urseg to sign a 20-year contract to open up shop in Newcastle within weeks.
We believe that it's one of the factors in choosing the site as well, because we know that skill base hasn't really left the area. They've diversified.
400 jobs are expected to be created and there's potential for apprentices.
The company's agreed for 45 pre-apprenticeships, and that means our young people will have an opportunity to learn new skills.
For the Port Corporation, it's a significant breakthrough.
We've long-term had a vision for a marine precinct, and Sensation Yacht's announcement today is the cornerstone for that.
There's little doubting who's the apple of his eye. Milton Thyday's 4-year-old daughter Tater, though, more concerned about her books than any contract Dad had signed. Both make good reading, with Thaiday to remain a Knight for a further 2 years.
It has been a hard journey for myself and my family, and it's just a big relief to, have that weight off my shoulders.
From his meteoric rise in rugby's ranks to his battle with alcoholism, Thyday's effort is all that more remarkable, and now he and partner Ruth seem to have found home.
The people that I've met, they've welcomed me with open arms, and that everywhere we've been. We haven't had that before.
Former Raiders forward Luke DeVico will meet his new teammates tomorrow after undergoing a medical, but his signing doesn't mean the club has given up hope of retaining Josh Perry.
No question that we want Josh Perry to stay at our football club, and I think he and Luke DeVico could form a very good partnership, and obviously Adam Allno would make a very good trio front rowers at our football club.
It's understood Perry met with a rival club today, but no formal offer has been made. As for the team to play the Roosters tomorrow night, Dustin Cooper and Andrew Price will make long-awaited returns from injury. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
It's taken 18 months to compile a regional tourism strategy tailoring each district to a certain type of visitor. For example, Becolbin will be sold to the higher end of the market, the Barringtons promoted to adventurous types, while the cafes and beaches of Newcastle will take in the younger visitor.
Rather than trying to be all things to all people, we're hoping to get a much better return on our marketing dollar.
It's resulted in 5 new districts. The Singleton Shire falls under 3 of them with ecotourism in mind.
We've certainly got wines, but we've also got our Lake St Clair. We've got 3 national parks around us.
Lake Macquarie has also been included, which not that long ago wanted to sever tourism ties with the Hunter altogether.
They're very much on board and they're an integral part of what is our tourism region.
A tourism region which doesn't include Port Stephens. Despite its locality, it falls under the North Coast banner and as such hasn't been included in the Hunters' strategy.
Blokes night at the netball, but it was the visitors who felt right at home early with the Canberra Darters dead on target. On a roll, it took some great defence to stop Australia's best under-21 players from extending their margin, and Ali Tucker, along with the 2 Kimberleys, Gilmore and Purcell, had a hand on things. Captain Jane Altschwager was fighting on, despite obvious discomfort in her knee. But Lara Wellham stepped up to take the pressure off. Not that JA wasn't having an impact, landing her 1400th league career goal. And with Wellham's goal shooting at 85%, the home side began pulling away. With the Jaegers' defence always a threat, Hunter's lead only grew as the game wore on, and so did their confidence. Flowing moves confirming why they're so competitive this season. Consistency, though, remains their only concern. Considered one of the more unlucky players throughout a 176 NRL game career, Luke DeVico wasn't fazed about today's medical in Newcastle. Recovering from a torn pectoral muscle, the prop has no doubts he'll be ready and raring come next season.
The lure to play with such players as Andrew Johns and Danny Badiris was, an offer that I couldn't refuse in the end.
Newcastle beat Melbourne for DeVico's signature. The club's also waiting on a clearance before signing British and Irish Lions winger Brian Carney for 1 year. It's expected his English club Wigan will release him. Carney will link with the Gold Coast team from 2007.
Leading today's march, Sergeant Michael Metz, a second-generation Army reservist now based at Adamstown.
Joined the high school cadets at Maitland. Then from there I joined straight into Army Reserve. Since then I've served overseas in East Timor and Malaysia.
Although many of these reservists have since retired, you get the feeling they'd be willing to serve again. Those participating in the parade are all volunteers, men and women with regular jobs who also help to protect our shores.
So sometimes we call them twice the citizen for that reason. But they're certainly a very involved and vital component of the total defence force, backing up the regulars all over the place in just about every conflict there's ever been.
Not putting a foot out of place, 900 people, including a delegation of Americans, wound their way along the foreshore. Strength in numbers, but not strong enough.
The numbers are not good, and they do need more, no question. More recruits.
If you're going to give it a go, treat it like any job.
The gun was fired at Fort Scratchley, marking what is a very special year, the 150th anniversary of when Newcastle Defence Volunteers first began serving. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Last night, NBN News revealed a ban on oyster harvesting in the top half of Tillagary Creek at Port Stephens because the oysters have tested positive for traces of human waste and a human stomach virus. The main offenders are these septic tanks. There's almost 500 in the catchment around Saltash, Bob's Farm and Williamtown, and waste from many of them has leached into the creek. Some are now asking why Port Stephens Council approved so much development in the first place without a proper sewerage system.
Back to the 70s and 80s, we shouldn't have approved septic tanks in a high groundwater table area. That was considered appropriate at the time, but not now.
The council has asked the state government for funding to help sewer the area, but that's still 5 to 10 years away. In the meantime, oyster growers have been hit hard, unable to harvest their product. The Shepherd family alone has more than 1.4 million oysters tied up. Growers say it is possible to save them.
The product that's there, we can move it out and our systems allow this, but they've got to be held for at least 2 months elsewhere before any source of, or any thought of human consumption. So they're test thoroughly clean and they cleanse themselves right through.
Unfortunately, there's no quick fix to the underlying problems. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
If it wasn't for these cans of food, police say the 2 female occupants of the house on Raymond Terrace Road may not be alive. A 000 call was made just before 4 o'clock this morning after a woman in her 30s and her mother woke to the sound of the cans exploding. Fire crews arrived to find the roof of an adjoining general store had collapsed.
Fire was spreading into the residence when firefighters arrived, and it was heavily smoke logged, so they were very lucky to get out, yes.
It's believed the blaze started in a storage area at the rear of the shop, causing around $100,000 in damage. Today, the owner inspected the charred remains while the work of forensics was slowed down because the site was deemed unstable. While the cause of the blaze is still being investigated, it's been confirmed there were no smoke detectors installed.
Fire alarms are an essential item in any household. It'll warn the occupants when any fire occurs and give them every opportunity to evacuate the residents.
Colleen West, NBN News.
Outdoor pool training in July isn't ideal, but it's a mark of dedication and the work of a champion. So preparing to make the plunge isn't such a tall order for Cardiff Heights brothers Tom and Jack Rickards, the pair among the country's top divers.
And do you think about the Commonwealth Games, the Olympic Games, every time you train and go to a competition and win, do you ever think that you could be there?
Yeah, I do, but I try and just think like the shorter steps at the moment.
At just 11, Jack hasn't had time to let success go to his head. He's the country's best junior male for his age and finished with 2 golds and a silver at a national competition last weekend. There he scored a perfect 10 for this arm stand dive and credits gymnastics for his quick rise.
Just you do a lot of strength work in gym as well, so that helps in diving. Yeah.
Older brother Tom also has a gymnastics background. He returned from the diving nationals in Perth with a gold and 2 bronze. The Year 12 student, along with Jack, now preparing for November's Pacific School Games. From there, a move south beckons.
I'm moving to Sydney at the end of this year to start training a little bit more, and once I finish school I'll be able to live down there.
Adam McKilrick, NBN News. Visiting the Lake Macquarie BMX Club today, former state and national coach Grant White never misses an opportunity to share his love of the sport. Perhaps the 32-year-old shouldn't be saying too much given he's accepted an offer to coach New Zealand's national squad ahead of the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing.
2 medals on offer for BMX, so yeah, it's my task to try and make 1 male and 1 female New Zealander win gold medals over there.
His appointment also raises a question of loyalty if it came down to the Kiwis and the Aussies racing for the gold.
I'd love to see the Australians do well also, but I guess with Bike NZ being my employer, my heart will be with New Zealand firstly.
Athletics and seen here training, Western sprinter Olivia Toro has posted a personal best of 11.71 seconds over 100 metres at the World Youth Championships in Morocco. It's the 15-year-old's first international competition and just fell short of a spot in the final. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Advocates for a Muswellbrook bypass saw a perfect piece of evidence supporting their argument crawl through town today. The CBD was brought to a near standstill as a piece of machinery was lugged along the New England highway by 3 prime movers. That may not happen every day, but the flow of cars and heavy vehicles is constant, fuelling the drive for a bypass.
It will revitalise Muswellbrook commercially. You're unable to speak in the main street. We're unable to encourage businesses in the main street because of the noise and pollution from traffic.
This map shows the possible directions of a bypass to the northeast of Muswellbrook. The RTA is expected to release its preferred option next week. It will fall somewhere between the yellow and green lines and be about 8 kilometres long. It will cost around $75 million, but there are some concerns a bypass won't bring economic benefits.
Because we miss out on the every Joe Blow coming in to buy something from our town.
Personally, I don't think towns go ahead with bypasses.
Until the bypass is built, everyone agrees something needs to be done about the safety of pedestrians in the main street. Next Friday, the RTA will assess highway safety, including a recently installed pedestrian island.
They will be looking at the adequacy of the arrangements that have already been put in place.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
I can't wait for this game. I've been looking forward to it for the last couple of weeks. They're the best team in the competition, and it just goes to show, or it will show, how we're going.
One of the Australians described it as the worst place in the universe. 22-year-old Yasmin Bright from Lochinvar wouldn't wish what she experienced in the Superdome on anyone.
The stuff that you see is just, I don't know, you just never want to go through that. You never want anyone that you love to experience something like that.
Yet Yasmin, a University of Newcastle communications graduate, survived the ordeal by making the best of a very bad situation.
We've been singing, we've been playing guitar, playing harmonica. I've had a haircut since I've been here. Someone's got their scissors out. We've just been hanging out, telling jokes about how much we smell.
Yasmin's family is just glad she's found her way out.
It is so much a relief because I think the conditions there and, well, as you know, as we've been sort of seeing on the news, have just been, getting worse and worse.
The family has had limited contact with their daughter and sister, who'd stopped over in the city after a stint working at a holiday camp in Connecticut. An email and a couple of very brief phone calls, all they've received.
She just wants to know that, let us know that she's all right. Like, she's just emphasising that she's all right and okay. But I think it's really getting to her a bit.
Yasmin joined the other Australians on a bus to Houston this morning. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
With a grand final appearance at stake, every point was going to be crucial, and Julian Morton took them any way he could. Mark Gardner also using the boot to get the students onto the board. While somewhere under all this, Wanderers hooker Stephen Lee burrowed through after sustained pressure from the Two Blues pack. Down 8-6 at the break, Uni had the perfect start to the second half with a try under the sticks. But the conversion collected one of them, costing 2 vital points. It was Wanderers' turn to strike back and did so through winger Andrew Delore, who finished off in the corner to help the Blues assume the lead once again. The students weren't done. Fighting all the way to save their season, they got back within 2. But it was Wanderers who found the match sealer and book a berth in the decider.